Social isolation can manifest as lacking interactions with other people. And there's a sad sense of solitude in the world, alone and you also can feel alone in a crowded room. And I think that when we talk about the elephant in the room, the past couple of years has certainly bred a different genre of social isolation and loneliness as we've all been navigating through COVID, and many times being in lockdown, not being with people that we love, that we want to hold, that we want to see. I know for myself, that's very much has happened to me. So I think that you'll find this discussion very meaningful, very helpful, and we're really looking forward to this discussion. So I want to give you a little bit of background on our panelists tonight. We have Carol Waldman. Carol's a gerontologist. We have Hope Reiner. Hope is a geriatric care manager. We have Bill Souls. Bill is a psychotherapist. And we have Orleen Grant, who is a nurse and also founder of a not-for-profit organization that she'll be telling you more about. And of course, our host for tonight is Ronald Fatoullah from Ronald Fatoullah and Associates. So thank you all for being here tonight and for joining us and for supporting this. So we're going to start off with our first speaker, and that's Carol Waldman. Let me tell you a little bit about Carol. Carol is a gerontologist and is known as a tireless advocate for seniors and aging issues in Nassau County and beyond. She has developed sustainable relationships in the senior service community and earned the respect of her peers. Currently, Carol is the Nassau County and Glen Cove liaison and consultant for the Age-Friendly Movement. In the fall, Carol will be teaching gerontology and healthy aging program at Hofstra University. So Carol's joined us before. We're thrilled to have her with us again tonight. Carol, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Vicki, and good evening, everyone. In the 35 years that I have been working with older adults, sadly, the most common and pressing concern I've encountered and tried to address is the increasing loneliness people struggle with as they get older. Where that comes from and what that looks like takes on different forms, but at its essence is the human need for connection so that our lives continue to hold meaning. Many things change as we get older, but what remains ever present is the need to feel needed, the desire to be there for others, the capacity to still listen to the world and what it has to offer, and the ability to communicate and share thoughts and feelings so that our lives are validated. In fact, the number one reason people choose to even join a senior center is not because they want a hot meal or access to services. It's because they want companionship and the chance to re-engage, to have a reason to get up in the morning, nourished by laughter and good conversation. I haven't heard my own voice or gotten to share my own thoughts in years, one woman told me. In fact, I'm not even sure I would recognize it. And another said, since my husband passed away, it's just not the nights that are dark and empty and cold. It's the days. I need to warm up. I need to light up. I need to be around people. Those who recognize these feelings and can reach out for support, and support is available to them, are the fortunate ones. There are many who don't or can't. Loss of loved ones, whether it be family, friends, or even pets, is certainly the number one reason people begin to experience loneliness. And the older we get, the more our social networks tend to shrink. Sometimes that's because we've retired and lose connection to our colleagues. And sometimes it's because family or friends are forced or choose to relocate. But it's not just the loss of others. It can stem from sensory deprivation. Touch starvation, as Vicki mentioned, is what makes us most unhappy and stressed. And loss of hearing or vision can begin to separate us from the world. It can come from having to give up the car keys and driving, or from a lack of mobility, because There is no easy access to affordable transportation options to engage with the world. It can be felt as a result of chronic illness or caregiving responsibilities that leave us homebound, and mental health issues like depression or anxiety that often lead to us a feeling of being immobilized and withdrawn. Or you can belong to an LGBTQ community, for example, or come from a cultural background that is not fully embraced yet and just feel disconnected as well. And sometimes it's not personal at all, but societal. We're brought up to strive for independence and to maintain it. The idea that most of us want to age in place makes perfect sense, provided only if we still have ways to connect in our communities and feel comfortable reaching out for help from time to time. If we worry about becoming dependent or a burden to others, we tend to withdraw even further. If our educational system and our upbringing only fostered interdependence, we would all be much better off, but it doesn't. We can't wait to grow up. We can't wait to learn to walk on our own, to get wheels, to move out on our own. We're taught from a really early age, the ideal is to be on your own. And that's the only thing we're striving for and celebrating. And despite our best efforts, we still live in a very ageist world. Society's attitude toward aging often dictates our behavior. And when even the smallest gestures or microaggressions occur, we can begin to feel like we are not seen, that we don't count, that what we have to say or contribute does not hold value anymore. And that can make even the most social person feel lonely. Have you ever been to the doctor with a family member and the doctor talks to your loved one about your health as though you were not even in the room? Even though you are in plain sight and the discussion is about your health, you become invisible. And of course, nothing has made social isolation and loneliness more glaring, as Vicki mentioned earlier, than the unexpected environmental events in our lives like this pandemic, making everyone lonelier and more vulnerable and isolated from one another, exacerbating the loneliness and social isolation older people have felt long before COVID ever came into our lives. Wherever this feeling of loneliness comes from, and this experience of being isolated, it is not at all uncommon. In fact, England, in response to discovering that 1 out of 5 people feel lonely most or all of the time, with 200,000 older adults having not talked to anyone in over a month, created something called a Minister of Loneliness to address this epidemic. And other countries like Germany, Australia, and Japan followed suit. In our country, according to several studies, 1/4 of Americans over 60 feel socially isolated, and 43% experience chronic loneliness. Since connecting with others is what gives our lives meaning, these statistics are staggering. One of the biggest risk factors for loneliness and social isolation, of course, is living alone, which has been known to increase mortality by about 30%. And 1/4 of older adults live alone in the United States. In fact, at our senior center, I would say that at least half of our members live alone. But this doesn't mean that everyone who lives alone is not enjoying a quality life. Alone time, solitude, can actually be a very healthy and healing experience, like during the process of grieving or creating. But more than half of older adults are unmarried, and that too does not mean that they're not enjoying a quality of life, and maybe even more so. Women outlive men a 5-to-2 ratio after 85 years old, and most women over 85 are not married. And this does not mean that they are not living a quality life. But it does just hint at the probability that living alone can be a very common and lonesome experience and can be socially isolating, especially if you're introverted or not well or tied down to the home because of caregiving responsibilities. Other risk factors include living in rural or secluded neighborhoods and not having the means to move about and not having neighbors or services available. And an over-reliance on technology. While it can help engage us like it's doing so right now, screens, as we all know, can be a barrier to the real connections that we need to make. Social relationships have long been considered crucial to our emotional well-being, but are now being recognized for fulfilling a biological need. And these relationships are, in fact, vital to physical well-being and even to our survival. The impact of loneliness and social isolation on an individual has often been cited to be equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day and presents a risk of premature death as much as obesity. It's been reported that feelings of loneliness actually increase mortality by 26%. In addition to being linked to substance abuse and developing depression, anxiety, dementia, and even sometimes suicidal thoughts, quite often loneliness and social isolation, and particularly the combination, is accompanied by a decreased appetite and poor diet, sleep deprivation and fatigue, high blood pressure and heart disease, chronic inflammation, muscle weakness, and even fall risk. This is why working to combat loneliness and social isolation by creating a more age-friendly world is so important, and why our next panelists will be exploring their agencies, organizations, programs, and therapies that are available to overcome this personal and very public health crisis. But I would just like to conclude with a very brief case study and a final thought. Walter, one of our seniors at the senior center, lost his leg early in his life. And though that limited his mobility, his upbeat attitude allowed him to still engage with the world. And he found a wonderful mate who was unfortunately developing Alzheimer's disease and eventually could no longer communicate as the years went by. Ashamed of his own limitations as he got older and stressed by having to care for his wife, Sylvia, who herself was growing weaker and more disoriented, he became anxious, depressed, and angry, and literally closed the door to the world. Despite our efforts to reach out, he refused to respond. One night, it all became too much for him, and he began beating her with his cane until they both were in tears and in a great deal of pain. He called me at 2 a.m. and said that he had done something awful and needed help. When I arrived, I can't begin to describe the nightmare and heartbreak I witnessed, but we quickly got her to the hospital and got things under control. He and I spent the rest of the night together talking in the hallway about his suffering, about his guilt, and about his loneliness. It was a night neither one of us would ever forget, but it got him to the next day, and it got him to the help he desperately needed. And weeks later, wonderful things began to happen. She began attending our adult day program, giving him the relief that he needed, and he began eating lunch once again with his old friends. It's been over 10 years since that episode, and they have both since passed away. But if I close my eyes, I can still hear him laughing in the dining room with his friends. And when I checked on Sylvie, I could remember her smile, the wideness of it, the warmth of it. And if I close my eyes again, I can actually still feel the sunshine wash all over us. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the author of a wonderful book that actually Vicki introduced me to, entitled Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World, said, "In the final moments, when only the most meaningful strands of life remain, it's the human connections that rise to the top." Thank you.
So, Carol, that was really so beautiful, so well said, and so reflective. Thank you for sharing that information. And I'm not sure even if you know this, but my mother lived in she lived, in her own home for all of her married life. But when she came to New York, she lived in assisted living, and she felt very lonely with all the people around her. She still felt very lonely. And some of the things you pointed out were relevant to that. And then ultimately she lived in we got a home, and she lived there for about 1.5 years. And she went to Glen Cove Senior Center. And she was in your Frail program, and she really loved the connection. It was a different take on, connecting with people, and she met, she met some wonderful friends. So, and that story that you told, brings tears to my eyes. Thank you so much. As always, we appreciate your, you joining us here tonight.
Thank you for taking on this very tough topic.
Yeah, it is a tough topic for sure. It is. So as we move along, one of the things that we felt committed to for this program was having someone who represented an organization that dealt with social isolation and loneliness. And people who know me, that once I get something in my head, it's that I have to get that right person to fill a specific role. Nothing really deters me. Through my channels, I was introduced to our next speaker, Orlene Grant, from the Juanita Grant Foundation. And I think that you'll be very inspired by what she has to share about her organization and about her experience. So thank you so much, Orlene. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you. Orlene Grant is the president and CEO of the Juanita C. Grant Foundation, Inc. The mission of the foundation is improving the quality of life for older adults through economic stability, education, and training. The focus is to help them age comfortably in their own home, socialize to prevent isolation, and effectively manage health conditions. So welcome, Orlene. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Vicki and Carol. Thank you for such a heartfelt presentation. I think it's just sets the tone for all of us. And it's a pleasure to be here with the rest of my panelists. I'm going to introduce the Juanita C. Grant Foundation to you, in particular the Village Connector Experience Program, and also talk about some of the things we have found in working with social isolation and reconnecting older adults. I'm going to utilize some slides, and here we go. Okay. So the Juanita C. Grant Foundation is a national nonprofit. We deliver programs and services at the local level, which gives us a perspective of what's happening in the country, but also being very in touch on the ground with working directly with older adults, community partners, politicians, different systems, higher education. Today, I'm going to share some things with you on how we were able to seize the opportunity of COVID-19 and the pandemic, which really turned most nonprofits on their head. But we did find an opportunity how to contribute to the crisis and how to look at some of the issues that we could make an impact with. I'm going to share with you how we adapted to learning to evolve during that time, to constantly adjust and pivot to the next stage, and then what the data has revealed to us. One of the things that the foundation does is to make sure it comes from a position of facts, not to intuition, but to really collect data and evaluate on each and every program that we are involved with. And then to apply what we've learned. We'd like to consider ourselves a learning organization in which we look at the information we have and then try to see what the emerging trends are, what we need to adapt, and then to look at best practices as we've developed them. Carol really went over some of the nuances and some of the pathology of loneliness. And I'm not going to reiterate them, but we do know that social isolation and the sense of loneliness that it accompanies it sometimes is deadly. And then the pandemic of social isolation and loneliness at this particular time is the #1 topic throughout the country. And I would say globally at this point, it has really taken hold as far as coming to the forefront. It's something that has been, I think, underneath for some time, spoken about, but really, as this webinar is demonstrating, it is really at the forefront of our conversation and our consciousness. one of the seminal studies by Dr. Emma Chapala of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education really looked at the strong connections between social connectedness and longevity. And I think Carol spoke to about how when you connect, you're present and you're seen, acknowledged, and that hunger for touch, it really impacts your mental health, your physical health, your disease process if you're managing any chronic disease. And especially we've all seen this, a level of anxiety and subsequent depression that may result from a sense of loneliness. In our foundation, social connectedness has become the umbrella for all our activities. We have reprioritized social connectedness because we understand in the core programs that we deliver on workforce development, elder abuse and financial fraud prevention, and of course the Village Connector experience and any of our advocacy or policy issues, the ability for older adults to be seen, recognized, and heard and connected to the resources, the individuals they need. One, for economic stability, to be engaged with the community and to work if they so choose or need to avoid becoming a victim of financial fraud or recognize the early signs of elder abuse, to get assistance in intervention, to be connected with the support system. And then the advocacy and the policy issues that we work with really look at what are the quality of life issues in the community for older adults. How can they connect with other older adults? What are the transportation systems that can help in that direction? What programs are available at low or to no cost, so there's high level of participation, and also the consistency of how these activities are available as we age. We were caught in the first 2 weeks in March of 2020. I think everybody remembers that when we had our first lockdown. All but 10% of our programs at that particular time were in person. That means we were in senior community centers, we were in library branches, churches, we visited senior centers. We also went to and conducted workshops at the community college. We were definitely well connected within the community, working constantly one-on-one or in small groups or large groups as large as 750 adults at a time in all our various programs. So in March of 2020, we really had to pivot in 2 weeks to totally online activities. And we were connected with the community, helping Meals on Wheels, doing calls, helping other outreach programs, but we really wanted to do something that was more substantial, one that could make an impact, one that we could trace, that we were assisting in this pandemic with older adults, and one that we could possibly wrap our arms around as far as policy advocacy issues for long term. We developed the Village Connector experience as a result of a recommendation from the vice chair of my board, who is extremely active in all of our activities. And what we wanted to do was create a program that was different from other call programs. We wanted to go beyond the well-touch call or the random call per week to say, do you have food? Are you able to get your medication and those kinds of things? We really wanted to establish relationships with older adults that were experiencing social isolation and a sense of loneliness. So we developed a curriculum, 16 hours training course of customer service, active listening skills, being able to use reflective statements, and also being able to assess and track with each call the level of energy, the cadence of the voice, what activities were going on, connections with resources that were being recommended. We wanted to collect data on how well we were intervening with this individual. So we developed this 16-hour certification course, what we call Village Connector Experience Ambassadors. And the title is kind of self-evident. The Village Connector is we conceive of the older adult community as our village. and the experience of belonging and having the service available to this group of individuals that sign up for these calls is the connection for a larger experience and how we can help them move forward in being more social, more connected, doing outreach, and also bringing them into the larger family of the village. So member calls, you can sign up for this, are 1 to 3 times per week. The calls are made by an assigned Village Connector Experience Ambassador that's trained and has been certified. And this is a dedicated person. We do not rotate the ambassadors, so you can establish relationships. And then, as I said, we collect data in each of our calls, as well as have online activities. And we also, like to surprise our individual members by sending them cards, surprise packages, letters to show that we acknowledge them. If they have an anniversary, they may be having a difficult week, so something to give them a boost. But we really want to know that they are considered and remembered. So we were able to launch this program, the Village Connector Experience, July 2020. Within 6 months of this launch, and we launched it regionally around the state of Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. area, and through our network. And within 6 months, we had over 750 members in over 20 states, which included Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, which came a little bit later. But you can see across the map, and I think one of the things that Carol talked about was the demand, the need for this is rampant. We were not expecting to go viral with the announcement. We were very happy that people received it well, but it was also an eye-opener that so many people across the country, different time zones, different coasts, were really seeking connections, seeking something to belong to at the height of COVID, and has sustained that so far. So I'm going to share a little bit about our member profile, experiences, and some of the things that we've learned. Not to be surprised, and this is consistent with most of the activities that we've had in the Why I Need to See Grant Foundation, but it has expanded nationally because this is our profile across the board now. And 90%, 95% of our members are female. They range between the ages beginning around 72 and up. Many of them live alone, or what we have and have more frequently have had are women who are in a marriage and who feel alone with living with their spouse, and that can be a male or a female. We've had it in both directions. 45% have some sort of caregiver coming into the home at some point, and that may be a family member who is a caregiver. We've had a small percentage of our males who are veterans and have had lived experiences. So they're dealing with some sort of level of PTSD in their history and continue to deal with that lived trauma. Most have some type of health or mobility challenge, and that includes sensory, hearing, sight. That has come into play as has been a challenge for a lot of our members. The other is to have estrangement from their family and friends. About 70% have lost contact or have lost family and friends along the way by now. And 30% have had a gradual loss in social connections. That may be their friends no longer drive, they may not have Wi-Fi to connect, they are not aware how to do telephone conferences to connect with some of their individuals. And also looking at churches, senior centers, libraries that were closed during the pandemic and are just now reopening. So many have lost many of their social contact through that loss of connectedness. Some of our experiences with the ambassadors, we do realize in our training of ambassadors that you have to start really at the beginning and meet that person where they are. So one of the first things that we talk about is the essence of establishing trust with micro steps. And that's really getting to know this person on a one-on-one basis. That is one of the reasons why we do not rotate ambassadors. We try to get as best fit as we can to when we interview the member who's coming on board for services to match them with an ambassador we best think that can meet their needs. The ambassador then goes on to build that trust and rapport, finds out what their hobbies are, what they like to do, used to do, want to do, and then beginning to build shared experiences with them. And I think we all know how great it feels when you're talking to a friend and they could say, oh, yeah, I like that Western too, or I saw that show yesterday. What did you think about it? And this is what our ambassadors do. I have an example of one of our ambassadors who's a seasoned volunteer, what I call a professional volunteer, who researched Westerns that her member liked to watch during the day. He didn't want to do much else. He didn't want to do sports, the news, movies, or anything, but he liked old black and white Westerns. And what she did when she found that out was to research that, watch some of them, so that the next time they talked about Westerns. And that helped leap over that kind of awkwardness in the beginning to establish a really fruitful ongoing relationship and also help build that level of trust. We also had another member who's had a member that was celebrating the Jewish high holidays, and the ambassador was not real familiar with the holidays and went and researched it. So the next few times that they interacted, they were able to have a common subject to talk about. So the experience portion of the Village Connector is really what we try to emphasize. And we are expanding this so that we are tailoring our approach to each individual, really drilling down into what we can work with them on as far as bringing some joy and some light into their life for that period of time. And the calls can last up to 45 minutes. So we really do take our time with these individuals to do that kind of connection within what I call intense listening. Listening is a skill and it's an art, and we really try to emphasize with our ambassadors that's one of the greatest gifts you can give to somebody is to really listen to them and let them know that you're listening. So some of the learnings that we've had from this, and we've been doing this again since July 2020, and we're really excited about how we've brought on new ambassadors and learned from the data that we've gathered. And just to share this with you, we know intensity works. We do an assessment on each call, rating them on every third call from 1 to 3, 1 being the least active, not least engaged, 3 going towards the most active. We know that if we start off with a real intense 3 to 4 times per week, say for 6 weeks working and talking with this individual, they usually start achieving a level of 2 and 3 by the time we are at the end of 6 weeks. They are really feeling more energized, beginning to connect and stabilize. Their voice is more energetic. They may be reporting on, they call their sister they haven't talked to for months, or they may have called family services to find out what's available. Over the average of 9 months, we do see people reestablishing relationships of some sort. And it may be the neighbor across the street. It may be calling and getting involved with some group. But we do see the beginning of reconnection at average of 9 months. The long haulers is what we call them. And we do know COVID has a long haul component to it, but our long haulers start off at 3 times per week or 2 times per week, and then gradually start tapering down to 1 times per week. And that's because they start getting busy. They start reconnecting, they start having appointments, they start having things that occupy their time and interest, and also give them a boost in their energy levels. So we do have these long haulers that we maintain contact with, and we may ramp up 1 or 2 to 3 times per week, depending upon what they need at their request. Sometimes they're going through a difficult diagnosis, or something may have occurred in their life and they need a little bit more interaction for a couple of weeks or a month. And so we can be flexible in how we respond to meet that need. Our most frequent issue that we deal with are health emergencies. We do know that sometimes, we just can't predict what might happen. And so we have had to work with individuals that have imminent catastrophic events as far as health on the horizon. We work with them as to how they would like us to interact with them. And if something happens, that's probably one of the areas we are still exploring, is how we can support that person during an health emergency. Best practices. I just wanted to include a picture of some of the ambassadors that we've had. And this is also one of the supervisors for the ambassadors through our connection with the Goodwill Chattanooga Senior Community Service Employment Program, of which we are a host agency. So some of the best practices we gain from our ambassadors is to really meet people where they are. Find out what their baseline is, really do a thorough assessment of what they need, what brought them to the Village Connector experience. Many times they just need to hear a voice. They haven't talked to anybody in a long time. They've lost connection, or they just may say they're lonely. And so we do know where they are when they start the programs. Again, connect with them as much as their interest. We keep really detailed notes of the calls so we can go back and find out what's important to talk about next time. What goals can I help this individual set for? I don't know, maybe connecting with the grandchild. How do I get my adult daughter to help me maybe make a phone call or Wi-Fi, do a Zoom call? Some of those things we help problem solve. Every call has the potential for being transformational. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. And I think that's one of the beauties of our program. Not only are the members able to benefit from the training and the sincerity of our ambassadors, but the ambassadors gain so much from working with these individuals and seeing them move from someone who has been withdrawn or not able to be seen by the public or their family, not acknowledged, to be acknowledged, feel more confident, and then start reconnecting with friends, family, and the community. It really does sustain you through some of these conversations. So having the integrity to build these relationships is the first order of business. And then acknowledging each of our members' humanity. That is one of the things I think we have learned, or I particularly have become more attuned to with the events across the nation in 2020. Some of the horrific events that have occurred, is to really acknowledge the humanity of each individual. And I think Carol had a really good example that happened to my sister who has passed. She became totally disabled within 3 years. And I was with her at a doctor's appointment. I just happened to be visiting her in Atlanta. We went to a doctor's appointment and went in with her just to help assist her to get up on, the examination table and to get back in her wheelchair. And when the physician and the staff came in, they talked to me about my sister as if she wasn't there, the same story. And I just had to redirect and say, it's not me, I'm not the patient, this is the person. And to redirect them to treat her as a whole human being. So that kind of brings us to a picture of what the Village Connector Experience program is about. Right now, we are expanding this to be the Village Collective and adding, new components to our service. And we hope to continue this and refine it as we progress. So thank you. And I'm sure my fellow panel members will expand on some of these thoughts and ideas.
So thank you so much, Orlene. Certainly, it's almost, there aren't, I don't think, enough adjectives right now to say how impressive your program is, and the dedication, the thought process, and the commitment that went into developing this. It truly is amazing. And I know out of the 20 states, and I know from our conversation that we've had, one of the states that you don't have is New York in there. We certainly would love to be in communication and discussion with you, because I think that the way that you have unfolded this, it would be a wonderful thing to have, here, from what we experience as professionals, and me as a caregiver, and people that I interface with, and to know that something like this is available. So we'll be knocking on your door, so to speak.
That'd be wonderful.
It truly is amazing. It's admirable, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay. So as we move on, our next panelist, aren't these panelists like great? I have to tell you, I'm impressed with us, actually, for presenting this program, identifying the necessity to talk about it. Because if you don't talk about this, you know what, you think it doesn't exist. So, and thank you all for, I'll keep on thanking you for being here with us tonight. So our next panelist is Hope Reiner. Hope is the founder of Hope and I, and she is a certified geriatric care manager and dementia practitioner. She combines geriatric care management skills with a focus on providing connection and friendship. She is a published contributor to the academic book, Social Isolation of Older Adults. And to her credit, Hope has been interviewed by PBS. She has done podcasts for Wells Fargo and trainings at home care agencies. Certainly being a person who's come out of home care agencies, I can imagine how valuable it is. And I know you'll talk about Hope and I, about what you do in terms of visiting people and who are prone to or, having effects of social isolation and loneliness. So thank you so much, Hope, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you so much. And I am very dazzled by the other panelists as well. Really, a lot of talent, a lot of great people doing great things. Anyway, there are two aspects to the work I do. And as a geriatric care manager, basically what they do is you help identify needs and you find ways to meet those needs. That encompasses the work that a geriatric care manager does. The other part of the work I do is on alleviating social isolation and loneliness. As was mentioned during the other people, over the past 2 years of the pandemic, people have really experienced profound isolation and loneliness. So what I thought I would do is talk about 3 different people who I've helped and worked with over the years. And I will start with the first person. That person, I was introduced to her by her sister, and she had social anxiety issues for her whole life, and she had never had a friend. So gradually and slowly, this person and I got to know each other. And she often said that she liked the fact that I was so sincere and lighthearted with her. We did very nice things together. We went to the fun things. We went to the circus and we went to movies together and shopping. She loved to shop. And then we spent 2 days in Atlantic City together, which was quite wonderful. And so I really established her trust. And what she started to do was, because she had gained more confidence in herself, is reach out to other people. And she joined a few different organizations. So that was very positive. The next person I want to talk about is a woman that it was very challenging, very, very challenging. She had borderline personality disorder, dementia, but mainly a terrible, terrible temper. And by the time I met her, she had really alienated practically everybody that she knew. And, you know, her family was at wit's end. They just didn't know what to do. So we spent time together. We had some nice times together. But then I was asked to take her to Los Angeles to see a doctor. On that trip, she became very abusive to me. And, you know, I didn't expect it, but it was in the profile. Anyway, when we came back to New York, I just decided to just be there for her. You know, let her know that I really, really cared about her. And we did things and found things that she loved. She loved animals. She loved museums. She loved movies and walks that we took together. And it just was a wonderful, loving, and happy relationship. And well, she never really got angry again. And every time I left, we left with a hug. We each gave each other a big hug. And so that was a wonderful experience. The third person I want to talk about is a woman who came from a very aristocratic background. And she was very elderly when I met her. She had lost her sister, who was her best friend, and she was alone for so long in such a sad and terrible way that she started to isolate for a long, long time. And of course, developed dementia. But when I met her, she had a whole retinue of people. She had trustees, and she had lawyers, and she had 2 shifts of aides and care managers and physical therapists. So she was very inarticulate. She couldn't really speak. And so I visited her every week for 3 years. And over that time, we had fun. We shared stories, and she even gave me advice. And again, it was just a loving and warm, delightful relationship. And so I feel that you should know this one fact. Nobody else has mentioned it, which is that it's really the quality of our social interactions and not the quantity that determines loneliness. At least that's my way of working with people. And so I've come to the end, and I want to thank you all so much for listening. I hope you derived some benefit from what I had to say. Thank you.
So we've put up a slide of social isolation of older adults, which is available. Certainly anybody who is interested in delving more into strategies, etc. And I'll read a strategy to bolster well-being and counteracting social isolation. You might want to consider purchasing the book. So thank you so much, Hope, for your stories. I know how committed you are to the work that you do, and I'm sure you've touched so many lives. And what is it that we are all about, right? That if we can't touch lives and support each other and other people, that's the best of, I think, the human experience. So thank you so much for joining us today. So our next speaker, Bill Souls, is a a psychotherapist. And, at this point, before I turn over the platform to Bill, one of the things that we talked about when we were doing our planning meetings for this program is social isolation and how it affects loneliness and how it affects us. And the one thing that I shared from my perspective is that social isolation comes in different packages, for all of us. And I don't consider myself a lonely person at all. I mean, I'm happy alone. I'm happy with people, and I feel joyful and grateful. But unfortunately, I've had a very experience where I've lost two brothers in less than a year, and it occurred to me while we were doing the planning for this program, there's a sense of loneliness that I had never anticipated. Took a while to identify, and certainly I'm trying to reconcile. So, it's been, this program has brought up a lot of different feelings for me over the last, a couple of months, et cetera. I think that's, we sometimes compartmentalize these things. As I turn over to Bill, like I said, Bill is a licensed clinical social worker who has specialized in trauma and grief recovery. And, so much of what we have with social isolation and loneliness certainly is tied up with grief and what you're going through. I'm an example of that, unfortunately. He's been the director of Stress Solutions of New York for the past 37 years, a short-term gig, Bill. And in 2013, proudly, he was recognized as Nassau County Social Worker of the Year. And once you get to know Bill, you can understand why he was designated as such. So welcome, Bill. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vicki. And I'm really honored to be here, especially with this kind of panel. Each of you is so impressive. So, in terms of addressing loneliness and social isolation, the underlying component to all of this is loss of connection, as each of you have done so well in terms of describing. As a matter of fact, we do not need to go too far back in terms of reminding ourselves of what that loss of connection looked like. And I'm, of course, referring to March of 2020 with the onset of the pandemic. And indeed, I know it was a difficult time for me, as it was for so many. As a matter of fact, I can easily recall the countless months that I was unable to visit with my children or grandchildren, who I normally saw on a weekly basis. And I very much can recall the first time that we did get together, where I was so excited to be with them, to hug them, to kiss them, and share time with them. A hell of a lot better than FaceTime. So when I think of all the pain related to that period of time for myself, and I just begin to reflect on some of our seniors, I think their pain can be multiplied a countless number of times. Indeed, they've had to suffer through relocation and loss. And their experience, unlike ours, where we were able to regard what we were going through as temporary, for them, many of it is permanent. So, as I mentioned, the underlying component is loss of connection. And with loss of connection comes two primary emotions: anxiety and sadness. And what I want to share with you today are a couple of different treatment approaches that do a wonderful job in terms of addressing each. And what I'm referring to is an invaluable treatment approach called havening. And I'll talk more about it in a little bit, along with the grief recovery program. So just to share with you a little bit of my background, as Vicki said, 37 years, that's a long time. But during that time, my primary goal has always been to try to effectuate more rapid healing for my clients. Reason being, my clients come to me for one of two reasons: inspiration or desperation. And I could assure you, more than 90% come for the latter. So indeed, I went through a significant journey along the way, learning hypnosis and other treatment approaches. And then in 1987, a new treatment approach was developed that was very much trauma-based and the only evidence-based treatment of its kind. It's called EMDR, otherwise known as eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So now you know why it's called EMDR. So having been certified in that literally put me on the map as a trauma professional. And indeed, I had become the #1 referral source for the Long Island Railroad, TWA, and American Airlines. To give you an idea of how effective and quick-acting EMDR is, I would get referrals of engineers who had killed people crossing the tracks. And they were so shaken up they could no longer commandeer the train. And within 6 sessions, that trauma was able to be resolved. To fast forward things, a new treatment approach was developed in 2013. It's called havening. Havening was developed by Dr. Ron Rudin, a neurobiologist who was trained in Harvard. He had noticed that babies who were upset or in emotional distress and crying seemed to be able to calm down through the warm, soothing touch of their caregiver. And after about 15 years of research, he came to find that the notion of touch was critical in terms of healing, and indeed has since become the foundation of havening. As a matter of fact, he went on to say that the notion of touch is hardwired into each of us. A little bit later on, I'm going to demonstrate to you what havening looks like. And I will also invite you to join in with me so that you can learn how to self-haven and thereby use it for yourselves. The other treatment approach that I want to touch on is the grief recovery method. That was developed almost 40 years ago. And it works real well in terms of some of those unresolved emotions that we have pertaining to relationship. It happens to be a very structured model done over 8 sessions. And it asks the attendees to go through several significant action steps that help bring them to the other side in terms of their emotional recovery. One of the things that I learned in my training in the grief recovery method, that there's over 40 different kinds of loss. It's not just death and divorce. Indeed, losses can pertain to moving, relocation. It can also pertain to significant life event changes, such as loss of health, whether it's physical or emotional. And indeed, these are areas that our seniors are very much experiencing. So I'd like to go back to havening now. And, in terms of that, I had mentioned it's based on the notion of touch. So I will first show you what the havening touch looks like. And the other piece that Ron had noticed is that by using the touch in conjunction with expressing upsetting emotions aloud, it serves as a release of that kind of upset. And you know what, if you think of it, there are two things that each of us are guaranteed, and I'm not referring to taxes. I'm talking about stress and death. And if you look at our school systems, they're totally bereft in terms of helping teach our children, teach ourselves how to effectively deal with that. Havening and the grief recovery method do a wonderful job in terms of helping in those areas. So let me show you what the havening touch looks like. It's very simple. So I'm crossing my hands and going from my shoulders to my elbows and repeating that. And then kind of like washing my hands. And I would continue in this fashion. Now for yourselves, as I mentioned, the notion of verbally expressing your upsetting emotions aloud will serve as an effective release of that kind of upset. So if you're experiencing anger, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, feeling sad, feeling lonely, all you will need to do is verbally express those emotions in conjunction with the havening touch. So now I invite each of you to join in with me as you do the havening touch and verbally express whatever pertinent emotions you may have. And indeed, as you do the touch, you may also want to close your eyes so you can focus that much better. And just remember that the notion of touch is hardwired into us. And it's reminiscent of the time when we were an infant and we were soothed by our caregivers, communicating to us that all is good, all is safe, and we're connected. That all is good, all is safe, and we're connected. Okay, you can rest your hands and open your eyes. Because of the shortness of this program, I just wanted to give you a little taste of it. I should also mention to you that during the pandemic, I saw a need to give back, and I was providing monthly no-cost experiential stress reduction workshops. And some of the feedback that I got from the attendees was how valuable it was for them to provide themselves with the touch. Again, because each of us were so isolated and alone. The notion of touch is a very critical component for each of us. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ron, for putting this all together.
You're more than welcome, but believe me, it just wasn't just me. So thank you so much, Vicki, and thank you so much, Jackie. You guys are the best.
So, and that's a great lead in. And by the way, I've kind of become the poster child for different things, but I actually was a recipient of Bill's expertise, and I was a a victim, I mean a candidate to be on one of his experiential workshop. And I'll have to tell you, he worked with me with a 25-year-old situation that I had where it was, it was a grief thing. And I have to say it reduced it by about 60%. It was pretty amazing. So thanks, Bill.
And how long did that take, Vicki?
It was like 3 sessions.
No, okay. Actually, the first time it was 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You talking about that? Yes. Okay. Well, you know what? Listen, it's late, and I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. Before you know what I'll be, who knows what I'll be doing? This will turn into who knows what. No, but great segue because number one, Jackie Rothamel and I are really fortunate to have a leader in Ron Fatoullah, who, with his vision and his trust and his acceptance of the ideas of the programs that we come up with and the support that we get is truly inspirational. And we work with that every day, and we love doing this. And I say every time we're on a webinar, I say, this is my favorite. It's like, this is my favorite. So tonight, this is definitely my favorite. And working with Jackie and Ron and the professionals that are here is really it is a career achievement, and I love every minute of it. So thanks to everybody. So can you imagine being an elder law attorney, the nature of that, and having people come into your office and going through whatever they have to take care of in terms of their preparation, documentation, everything else, and the amount of conversation that Ron has had over the years, with his clients, and none the less of which are affected by the fact that they are isolated seniors who become vulnerable. So as we turn this over to Ron, and for those of you who don't know it, it's out there far and wide, but Ron has been recognized by Super Lawyer and Best Lawyer for 15 consecutive years, very deservedly so. And he'll talk now about how to protect your assets and how to make healthcare decisions for your loved ones, and what's happening with the New York Power of Attorney, and also explaining laws in New York for Community Medicaid. All of these things are part and parcel to what he does every day to protect, advise people so that they get their best advice. So thank you, Ron, for all that you do, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Thank you so much, everyone, because all of the presenters up until now were, I'm going to use the word compassionate, passionate about what you do. Bill, I'm still so relaxed from the program you gave. I thought that was amazing. And, when I think about it, before I went to law school, I actually went to social work school. I was in a doctorate program at Brandeis, and I loved it. I decided to become an attorney and go to law school, but the ability to connect with my clients was and is so enhanced, from the information that I've learned from going to social work school. So I just love that. I am going to share my slides with you. Here we go. And let me just start from the beginning, though. Now, you might ask, what does an elder law attorney have to do with social isolation? Well, let me tell you, every day of the week, we deal with an individual that is isolated in some way. We do probate, and that's one of the biggest isolators, if that is a word, that is created through the death of a loved one. And that's when some people come to see us. We do planning when somebody becomes ill. That's when people come to see us. They feel isolated with the loss of a spouse, the sickness of a spouse. etc. We spoke about the loss of a sibling. Orlean spoke about it. Vicki spoke about it. I know that Jackie has felt it as well. It's prevalent, and so did I. About a year and a half ago, my brother, who, I love so much, he was my best friend. And even more than that, when somebody asked me, where do you live? I said, well, I live, down the block here. And sometimes I would say, he was sick for a few years. I said, but my home is really wherever my brother is. And I really felt that. And when he passed away, I just felt so alone because there was nobody in the world that could take his place. And, I'm doing great now, but for a while it was just not easy. It just really wasn't easy because you do feel alone, even if you're around so many people. The fact that that happened during COVID, and I know the same thing with Vicki, just makes it that much more worse and more isolating. So let me just go over some basics. I'm only going to speak for about 10 minutes. I'm going to zip through some things, but I want to tie this all together. When you are going through things, legal things, changes in life circumstances, whether it's a death or an illness, again, people call us. And we want to make sure, and I want to make sure that you have your team together. Because when the you-know-what hits the fan, you don't have to, and you should not be feeling alone and isolated. You should be able to pick up the phone, call your attorney, call your financial advisor, CPA, geriatric care manager. Hope, that was terrific. And just don't feel alone. You have your professionals there. They're going to go through this with you. You don't have to have all of the answers. You will get the support from the team, but I want you to create that team while you're feeling as well as you could feel. In other words, do it now. Do it now. Create the team so that when something does happen that really does affect you, that makes you feel isolated and alone, because it will happen, pick up the phone and call a professional who can help. You saw how Hope helped a client. I have a 98-year-old client that I actually visit about once every 6 weeks or so, just popping in to say hi. And the feedback that I get is that this is the highlight of her 6 weeks. And I love talking to her. I have as good of a time as she has, but her world is narrow. And I know that visit means so much to her. I do want to talk about documents that everyone should have, but in the context of social isolation. Okay, now I spoke about the new power of attorney law. I spoke about this several times. Many of you might have already heard about it, but a power of attorney is there so that in the event of capacity, you have someone else that could manage your assets, do the planning, etc. And that's what I say all the time. I'm going to change it a little bit tonight. When you sign that power of attorney, yes, it does everything that I just mentioned. However, what it also does is when you sign that power, even if you are not losing it, even if you are totally, you have total capacity, that power of attorney is still good right then and there when you sign it. You are not alone. If you see the markets going down and the markets going up and you have some exposure to the markets, call your financial advisor. But also, you want to be able to talk about financial issues with the agent on your power of attorney. And if you can't go out, make sure that the agent goes out. It might be a child, it might be a close friend, it might be a professional that you've named as the agent on the power of attorney. But they can do for you, you could control it and you won't feel as alone because you're handling what you have to handle. You'll have more control over your life. So yes, a power of attorney is there in the event of incapacity, but it's also there from the moment you sign it. And it's very powerful, and it will help to reduce the feelings of isolation. You're not alone in making your financial decisions, even when you have capacity. Healthcare proxy. Well, everybody knows what a healthcare proxy is. We draft these documents for our clients. With the powers of attorneys, you really do need an elder law attorney to draft the right type of power. We work on our powers of attorneys almost every week. There's always a case coming down and we tweak them, and we're having a meeting next week again. So you want the elder law attorney to draft them. The healthcare proxy is a simple document. That is a document where you appoint someone else to make your healthcare decisions when you no longer can make those decisions. So if it only comes into play later on, how can it help with isolation at this point? Let me tell you, when you name an agent on that healthcare proxy, you name a proxy, how do they know what decisions to make? Well, you have to share what your wishes are with the proxy, and you have to talk to them. You'll put it down in a living will, but there are multiple conversations regarding what you want medically, and especially medically, when it might be time to pull a feeding tube, but it can be for medical issues way before that as well. And if you've had that conversation and you need to go into surgery and you're feeling alone and you're feeling isolated, out of control, you have the proxy to talk to. That's the right time to talk about these issues. They're the ones that might make a decision while you're under surgery. Surgeon comes out, we could either do this or do that. Well, you might have an individual that has to make that decision. But what I'm saying is that's another individual that you can go to regarding healthcare decisions. You don't have to make them alone. And once you don't have capacity, you can make sure that someone makes the decisions that you want. It's extremely important. And this reduces the feelings of anxiety and isolation. A living trust in the same way. These are called advanced directives. Living trust, in a sense, is an advanced directives. You transfer assets into a living trust. We might be doing it to protect the home, or to get on Medicaid, or to save on estate taxes, or to have a trust for a disabled child, or a trust for a spendthrift child, or for grandchildren, because you don't want them to get your money at age 18. You want them to be more mature. And the list goes on and on. But with that living trust, assets are put into that trust. And you might think, geez, I'm feeling pretty depressed. A friend passed away. Things are not good. I just don't feel well. I just feel out of control. Well, with that living trust, you should have a bit more confidence, because there's an individual called the trustee. Even if you are the trustee, you'll know that there's a successor trustee that could just step in right away with a trust that you've created and handle everything. You don't have to worry about it. I was dealing with an individual today, an attorney who's not doing well, had extensive surgery recently and felt very out of control. And we had this conversation. I said, look, you remember I set up a trust for you. You have your trustees that you can have handle certain situations for you. And she said, I just feel so much better. I know that this will be taken care of. and I cherry-picked that person, someone I trust implicitly. So you get the benefit of all of that. Last will and testament, well, that's a document only for later on when you pass away. So let me talk about isolation, because we get this issue quite a bit. I would say it must have been about 30 years ago. We had a client who came to see me, and I spoke to the client and the family, and I point blankly said, Mr. Jones, not his name, I said, it might be time to give up your car. It sounds like you're not seeing that well, which is what he told me. And, he had a couple of brushes with, close calls there. In any event, he didn't listen. The family didn't take away the car keys, and he hit 18 people, no one fatally, but 18 people on Jamaica Avenue in Jamaica, Queens. 18 people. And there are 18 lawsuits against him with assets that I wanted to protect in this trust, which I did for some of them, but he didn't get around to totally funding that trust. So anyway, there may be a point in time when an individual can't drive, is living alone. I know Carol was talking about that. You feel very isolated, very alone. And you want to have all of your legal work in place, before this happens, because you want all your experts in place. You also want to have supports in place, like Carol was talking about, places that you can go to, like the senior center that she was running for so long. Having someone like Hope in place is great. Fears that crop up when you're isolated. Bill is there. Orlean's organization, how amazing is that? And you don't have to feel as isolated with Uber and Lyft. And I told that to the client that I spoke to, who underwent the surgery, today. And I said, what about Uber and Lyft? He said, oh, that's so complicated. And I said, give me 5 minutes. And the app was downloaded. And I just said, well, where do you want to go to? Type it in. Oh, I can't see. I said, well, put on your reading glasses. I'm waiting. And he said, that's it? I said, yeah. He said, that's not bad. I said, yeah. Where would you like to go to tomorrow? He said, I can go anywhere. I feel so much better. So these are some things to think about. Also, getting the care you need is something that obviously will reduce isolation. You won't be stuck. And even if you are fairly stuck, at home or in a wheelchair, you're going to have someone with you. You don't have to do it alone, nor should you do it alone. I remember my mother, God rest her soul, she wanted to do everything alone. She didn't want a home health attendant when she needed it. She had a situation of falling all the time. Finally, I talked her into it. The moment she had a home health attendant, she never fell again, and her mood was elevated from down here. Can't say to all the way up there, but it really was elevated tremendously. I get people on Medicaid. We set up these trusts to get people eligible. So that goes a long way. There's so much happening with Medicaid. Yes, we might have a new 30-month look back coming on board, but we also have a governor who's trying to go so far in the right direction that within the last couple of weeks, there's a proposal in her budget to actually eliminate the asset test for Medicaid. But how great is that on one hand? But the other problem is there's not enough money to pay for what she would like. So we have to really look at this and see, but I think we're making progress. Still a lot of planning. It's not as easy as just, oh, you could have $1 million and apply. Medicaid will recover against your assets. There's income levels, there's taxes when you transfer and capital gains tax issues, blah, blah, blah. All these things have to be taken care of, but that's something that's going on. and home care is going to be restricted as soon as May. This has been pushed back a lot, and we're now getting word from the Department of Health in New York that a lot of changes, including the task-based assessment tool and the assessments and the physician's role, and so many things will start to take place May 1st. And that's pretty soon. And I just want to make mention that the Medicaid trust, which is an irrevocable trust, which can be revoked, will likely give an individual a sense of control, knowing that they'll be able to go on Medicaid if they need it, and they won't be alone, and they don't have to fight every battle on their own. They can get an attendant. Right now, somebody came into me, I don't care if they have 500,000, maybe even more, we could get them on home care very quickly now with no look back. But use the resources and professionals that you have at your fingertips, myself and my firm included, but everyone on this panel. So just want to thank you guys so much. I enjoyed this. I am so inspired. I can't wait to do some havening. Thank you all so much. And to everyone on the panel, thank you so much, Vicki and Jackie. Really do appreciate it. Oh, you're on mute.
I gave out the winning lottery numbers. Too bad everybody missed that. So
I can read lips, though.
I lied. Anyway, so thank you. I mean, always, Ron, the way that you pull all these things together and certainly integrate in the topics and and how that affects everyday real life with the clients is always is so inspiring. We really appreciate that. So we're gonna wrap up. We thank everybody's patience. We're running a little bit over, but number one, I do want to recognize actually Anthony Lemma is on the call. Anthony Lemma is very important to the firm as well. Anthony Lemma is my partner in crime in outreach and government affairs for the firm. So we can't see him, but we know you're there. I just want to turn back to the panelists and have them wrap up, give us a kind of like a parting thought, something, a takeaway that they would like to leave everybody with at this point. So Carol, why don't you go first?
Wow. So many important things that have been said, but there's a lovely quote just to end with, I guess, that I think really says it all. And I apologize that I'm not sure who I should attribute it to, but it says, "We are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's magnitude, and we are each other's bond." And I think if we can come away recognizing the value of that, I really think we will be doing our part to combat this tremendous condition that so many of us are struggling with in terms of loneliness and isolation. And again, Ron, Vicki, Jackie, thank you all so much for putting this together. And what an honor to be with this panel. You guys are doing great work. Thank you.
Thanks,
It's our honor. Thank you.
Orlene.
Yes, I just want to echo some of Carol's comments. And also, it's been an honor to be with all of you. And Vicki, thank you for finding me. It's been great. And Ron, it's great to know you and everybody on the panel. I would just like to challenge everybody with a call to action to pay it forward and to reach out to individuals you know that you don't know, and to recognize people as individuals. Each and every opportunity you have, from the cashier at Whole Foods to getting on the bus or saying goodbye to your Uber driver, if you see a name, call them by name. If you don't, just, how are you? And respond back, how are you doing? And give that person, just a moment of your time and look them in the eye and recognize them. That will go a tremendous amount to connecting us together, to giving somebody a thought. I got recognized. I got acknowledged. It means a lot. And I would just leave you with that parting thought.
And I do that every day of my life. I connect with people. And it's so, I love it. It's just, my mother did it when I was little and she embarrassed me so much. But that's one of the things I love about my life. But Orlene, I just wanted to mention that if you do start something in New York, I'd love to get in touch with you.
That's a deal.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So those are beautiful thoughts. And, I'd love to say, let's do part 2 in a few months as we're practicing all these things. We'll look forward to that. Bill.
As a matter of fact, Orlene, if you do not do something in New York, I'd like to get in touch with you.
You're going to have a lot of calls, Orlene, all right?
Vicki, I can't thank you enough for inviting me, to be a panelist. I'm really just so impressed with everyone. And this was really such a meaningful topic. And I know how hard you've worked behind the scenes, Jackie. I guess the one thing I'd like to leave with people is that, each of us encounter emotional pain. And the thing is, we really have a means to help minimize that discomfort. And believe it or not, it's all in our hands. So I very much would encourage each of you to self-haven on your own. As a matter of fact, I would say 80 to 90% of my clients self-haven.
That's great. Thank you. Ron, parting words?
Well, I just want to thank everyone on the panel. I was so, and still am, so inspired. This was just great. My parting words are, in real estate, they say location, location, location. I'm all about plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead. It will reduce your feelings of isolation because you'll have your life in order. There are so many of my clients that come to see us and they say, I almost didn't come in because dealing with a will, it's talking about my death, it's hard to deal with. I said, but after the consultation, I said, well, how do you feel? They lift their bodies up and they say, I feel great. I feel like I'm in control. I feel like I'm going to live forever, despite the documents that I'm paying you for. So plan ahead. You're going to feel much better if you do so.
Thank you. And Jackie, give us a couple of parting words.
Well, first of all, I loaded 2 great documents in the chat. So if you just click on the little 3 dots at the bottom of the chat box, you can save the chat to your computer. So in there is the contact information for all our panelists. And as well, there's a wonderful list of resources that are available for seniors and for caregivers of seniors and professionals in order to help seniors in the community. But again, it was just so inspiring. And I love working with older adults. It's really become my passion the last 15 years. And thank you for all the wonderful work that all of you do. And Orlene, please bring your program to New York, because I know you'll have a lot of people that want to get involved and volunteer and be part of that movement.
And she's not going to have a choice. She's going to have so many phone calls. She's just have to, that you're going to have to move to New York. I don't know. So, and for me, I have to tell you, thank you to everybody, for your confidence and your dedication in being here tonight. I've been a passionate advocate for senior issues for many, many years. These programs are very gratifying to me. And when I can bring together a panel like this, I say, gee whiz, what a great effort on everybody's part. And we take such pride in this. And, for everybody that's here, that trusted professionals who can answer questions or be there when you need them. So, and stay tuned. We have other things up our sleeve in the future, and we look forward to welcoming you back.